Hey guys, Marty here. Today's video I talked about a little bit in my last video, but it's going to be on methods of rolling your maps and a little bit of my opinions on some of them. So basically what I've got here is my shape channels. That's the map I've been running mostly right now. I'm going to kind of do this video in two parts. The first is I'm going to talk about a few methods of rolling maps. Then I'm going to talk about the specific method that I'm using for these maps. And I'll roll my 30 maps that I'm going to do first set in that part. Then I'll talk about some things like prophecies and whatnot for mapping. But so to start things off, something that people often are concerned about when they're newer players in PoE is using larger amounts of currency on a map. For example, a lot of people don't want to use that alchemy orb on a map, and they just are more comfortable transmuting a map. So I'm going to show you right here why it's really important to use an alchemy or higher on a map. So this particular map, I just used an alchemy. You guys saw me do it right there. And this map has 81 quantity, 48 rarity, 31 pack size. Now, my transmuted map that I also used an augment on, this map has 26 quantity, 16 rarity, 10 pack size. Now, you might think, oh, but you had to use an alchemy on it. Well, I mean, think about it. When you've got 3 times as much quantity and 3 times as much pack size on the map, not even completely ignoring the rarity, which is also triple as much, you're going to get significantly more than an extra alchemy out of that map. And this sort of general idea continues throughout all the further methods of rolling maps. So the next one I want to talk about is, a single or maybe double tap of Chisel and then an alchemy. This is a pretty common SSF tactic. For example, say you're rolling 10, 15 maps in SSF, you're rolling maybe your tier 15s or your tier 14s, but you're at a point where you've kind of run out of chisels. Maybe you have 50 chisels remaining. This is kind of a tactic that a lot of people will do to kind of spread the quality out through maps. Because if we look at it, this map with 10% quality, it has 4% more quantity over this map, and the amount of mods on the maps are about the same. This one rolled slightly worse mods, which is why the quantity is only slightly higher, and the pack size is a little bit lower, as well as the rarity. Each mod is it has its own value in how much rarity, quantity, pack size it adds. There's a list of that somewhere. I think it's on PoEDB. I'm not really sure where. I don't really worry too much about it. But that's why you'll get inconsistencies even if you have the same number of modifiers on it. But anyways, this is a kind of a way to spread out your quantity, because in this we took it from a 75 quantity map to an 85 quantity map, which, well, technically it's 185 because you start out with a flat line of 100% quantity, and then that 85% quantity is on top of that. So we didn't actually even increase the amount of drops we'll get by 10%. So this may seem like it's not worth it to a lot of people to chisel, but chiseling is worth it. Now, let me explain why. So chisels are pretty pricey. You're going to end up paying quite a bit for them, but map sustain directly pays for your chisels. So for example, I've got my tier 9 right now. It shows that I have these unlocked, but these are all shaped maps. So I have the bonus from them, but they can never drop as a tier 9. Anyways, my tier 9 shaped map right now is Volcano. I've got these listed at 3 chisels each. So, maybe I'll lower them to 2 later. They're not selling ridiculously fast anymore. I've sold maybe 50 of them in the past few days. Actually, a little bit more than that, maybe closer to 100. But every time I drop one of these maps, it is 3 chisels or 2 chisels. And the higher tier you're doing, the more relative chisels you're getting. When you're running tier 16 Elder Underground Seas and you get a tier 15 map drop, you could probably sell that for 20 chisels. I mean, I don't know the exact ratios. I haven't checked them in a few days, but you get the point. And obviously that'll change as leagues go on. So dumping those chisels into your maps, you're directly making that return every time you get extra map drops back. And so a lot of people will ask, oh, well, what about burial chambers? If I'm running these, is it worth chiseling? In my opinion, yes, it is worth chiseling. I still don't usually chisel my burials unless I'm doing some serious try-hard mapping, like when I was pushing to 100. And the reason is just that I'm lazy to buy chisels, but every time I have chisels, I'll always use them. I will never sell any of these chisels unless I'm completely desperate to buy an item, and I think it'll be sold if I wait. So I'll chisel these maps up, and each of these burials will usually sell for a chisel or half a chisel or whatever. And putting that extra 4 chisels in, you're going to get a lot of maps back that are sellable for the currency. In addition to, you're going to get more currency. If you're farming something like burial chambers, you're going to see a significant increase in doctors over a large number of maps. You may not see an increase in 100 maps, you may not see it in 200 maps, but by the time you get to 500, 600, 700, maybe even 1,000 maps, you're going to be seeing a massive increase in the currency returns, the unique item drops, the map drops, all that kind of stuff. So chiseling, in my opinion, always worth it, really valuable. You can see the quantity goes up because of it. So that's the other tactic that you'll see sometimes in SSF. And then the last is, of course, a full chisel and then an elk. Now this map only rolled 4 modifiers, you can see, but the quantity is already higher than this one with 6 modifiers. So now imagine this map had 2 more modifiers. It could be about a 35 pack size map with over 100 quantity. Now that's going to significantly increase your turns from this map. So those are kind of the 4 basic kind of investment levels for mapping. And personally, I think that they're all worth it. Except for transmute and go. I will never transmute maps unless it's a map that I don't even intend to clear. For example, if I'm moving Elder Influence or something and I just want to get that map out of the way, like if it's dungeon or something, that is just a pain in the ass to clear. I'll often just transmute it, throw it in, and be good to go. But under any other circumstances, I will at least elk and then go, or most of the time I'll chisel. My current maps on these shape channels, I'm chiseling all of them. And you'll see that in a little bit. But yeah, so don't be transmuting your maps unless it's the very beginning of the league and you can't handle many modifiers. That's, I guess, something else I should talk about. When you out a map and you have these modifiers, the map is clearly more difficult. This map, the mobs are going to be a lot more tanky, and they're going to do more than double their damage because of the frenzy charges and the double elemental damages. However, the elemental damages will get reduced by your resistances and whatever, but it's going to be a much more painful map to run than this one. But that's the price you have to pay to sustain maps. That's the price you have to pay to get large amounts of currency. Whatever. You guys can look back to my VOD from the start of the league and see how much Jake and I made. And we were investing very heavily into our maps. We were often even going for prophecies. We were fully sextanting, fully chiseling, alking, and then this final step, which is volleying. So I'm going to show you what I'm doing for my maps right now. This has been pretty widely covered, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it and explain sort of how to make the most out of volleying maps. So first of all, I don't bother only taking white maps out. I will always scour my maps. I have no issues sustaining scours, so there's no issues there. So first thing I do, everything's scoured, we're good to go. I type in 20 and then I'll chisel all these maps. And the reason I do this is because this, you can see as we're getting them to 20 quality, they're highlighting, so I don't have to ever think about, oh shit, did I hit 4 chisels on that one, or do I need to go back and do one right? So it just saves you a little bit of pain as far as thinking about it. But if you're rolling them in your maps, or in your inventory, just be sure to make sure that you get your full chisel value. However, I do recommend rolling in a tab, and I'll show you why in a second here. So now all 25 of our maps are chiseled, or 30 of our maps are chiseled. Next step, type in rare down here, and we just alch them all. This saves you time when you misclick like that. You can skip a map, just get to easily know which ones you have to do. Now we got them all rare. Normally you'd be scanning over these maps one by one to see which ones are good, but we can actually do some things to make it easier on ourselves. So the first is monster pack size in quotations, and then we put a 1. Oh shit, I fucked it up, didn't I? Yeah, I forgot the plus. All right, so a little blooper here, but so you put monster pack size +1. You move these maps over to the right like this. You don't have to do this, but this is my method. So what does this tell us? When you alch a map, the minimum possible pack size is still over 10. So these maps on the left, because they're not highlighted right now, we know that they have 20 plus pack size, which is something that I always try to go for when I'm rolling higher maps than maybe tier 7s. Even if I'm doing these methods, I would scour and alch again if I got less than 20 pack size. So our pack size is up. Next step, we're going to type in REFL, or you can just type in the full reflect. You don't have to do this. You can do this for whatever mod your build can't run. If you can't run no regen, you can do that. You know, if you can't run Leech, you can search for that, but those are mods that, or Leech only rolls on red maps, so it's not that big a deal. But you can search for any mod, like Frenzy. We can see which map has Frenzy on it. But yeah, so we've got our Reflect maps here. We've got our sub 20 pack size maps there. So the next step, I grab a Scour, and we're just going to scour all of these maps. And then we're just going to grab the Alchemy again and re-roll these maps. So you can see I've still got the Reflect showing, so it's already showing me the new maps, and then we just go back to Monster, Pack Size, and I recommend copy-pasting this so you don't have to do what I'm doing right now. And we can see that it's already perfectly lined up. These two maps are good, so we can move those down. And then at this point I'll usually just go from my inventory because there's only 4 maps. But yeah, there we go. We rolled these. We know they're over 10 pack size. Type in Reflect again. Now all these maps are good to go. So that's my baseline for maps. Even if you're not volleying, this is a great way to roll your maps. We've now got 30 maps good to go. Normally I pre-roll in a much larger batch. So if we go, where are my, I've got this tab right here. This was a tab of pre-rolled burials that I had before we hit level 100. So all of these maps on the left are unidentified vol maps that are pre-rolled. You see every single one is fully chiseled, ready to go. All of these maps right here are also rolled. And then these ones right here I had put aside, and I'll explain why later. This one's just a random map. But yeah, these are special maps that I'll explain in a second here. So anyways, now we've done this step. The next step, if you're volleying your maps, which you don't have to, but I like to vol my maps, what you do is you just go along these maps. You vol them all one by one. Oh, I forgot to type down here vol. So that's the next step as we type that in. Or whoops, sorry, corrupt. And now we can see which maps are volled. Makes it a little easier on you, especially when you're rolling as many as I showed in that other tab. So what's happened now? So these are the vol outcomes. One of the potential outcomes is that they will be +1 into a connected map. What that means is, you know, these ones upgrade into ATOLs and underground seas. These are not brick maps. You can still run these maps. They're still rare. They're still quality. They're still pretty good maps to run. So they're not gone. The next step is we're going to look for REFL again for the Reflect maps. So we got one Reflect map, and I set it aside over here. The reason for this is because the next step is sextanting. So in this particular instance on channel, I'm using 3 sextants, but you could easily use 1 or 2. It's just your decision as to how much investment you want to make. So now I've got my 3 sextants. I always go for sextants that add monsters. I don't care how many times I have to re-roll it. If it takes me 30 sextants, I will bite the bullet and do it. Even though it's a waste, that's just part of RNG. You know, it's sunken cost fallacy, but then the rules of big numbers apply eventually. Once you've used enough sextants, you're going to hit that equilibrium where, you know, you're not unlucky or lucky. So we've got 3 sextants here that add monsters. Now we can just grab whatever maps we want to run out of here. Usually what I'll do is I'll set these unidentifieds aside like this. But since I have so many unidentifieds, I don't need to worry about that. So I'll just grab, you know, the ones on the right, and then I would normally just run these, you know, right now. But now the reason we set aside these unidentified maps is because there is a sextant modifier that's found items in identified maps drop identified. So that'll, if you're running an identified map like these ones right here, every single item that drops that's rare or unique drops as an identified item. But the overpowered part of that is in an unidentified map, that sextant adds 15 pack size and 30 quantity. I think it might be quantity and rarity, but I'm pretty sure it's quantity. Sorry if I'm wrong there. But anyways, that is insane. That's 15 more pack size. Remember this 35 potential 35 pack size map here, if we had 6 modifiers on it. When we volled that, that goes unidentified. Let's just pretend that. When that map goes unidentified, from a vol orb, it adds 30 quantity already. The modifiers stay the exact same. So if this map went unidentified, the modifiers would still be fires 2 additional projectiles, skills chain 2 additional times, contains 2 unique bosses, and gains an endurance charge. It would stay as that, but it would have 117 quantity instead of 87 quantity. And then when you throw it in with that sextant, now it's a 40 pack size map with 147 quantity. So it just gets obscene when you're stacking those sextants and you're using it properly with the vol orbs. Now you can still lose money with this method, especially if you're on softcore. Vol orbs are quite expensive. They're more than a chaos each. But on hardcore and early in a league, this is a great way to multiply your money, and I think it's worth it even if the prices get ridiculous. If they get so insane, I'll stop doing it until the prices come back down to where I think it's worth it. And if they don't, then I won't even worry about it. But this makes a big difference in your returns if you can properly utilize this. Now, the reason we set aside these reflect maps, a lot of people would think this is a bricked map because my build cannot run elemental reflect. I will instantly die. The first attack I do will kill me. But there's another sextant that cannot take damage from reflect or something like that. Monsters are doubled and you cannot take damage from reflect. So whenever you get this sextant, you can run these reflect maps that you set aside. So often I'll be stacked up in this particular set here. We originally had like 15 or 20, 30 reflect maps, and I set them aside up here. We ran through all of those just because whenever we get that sextant, we pop in those maps. That way we're not wasting any currency on rolling those maps. And a lot of them will be like, this map right here. You can see it went to 8 modifiers, which is another one of the vault outcomes. So it's 39 pack size and 121 quantity, 61 rarity. Absolutely insane to get these 8 modifier maps, and you'll get quite a few of them when you're vaulting. Another outcome is that it can go down to 5 modifiers, or it can change to 5 modifiers, or it can have no change. There's quite a few outcomes to vault orbs, but that's my method to vaulting maps. For everyone that's asked about that, it's been a very popular question in my chat. I didn't really want to explain it because it's kind of confusing, and I feel like a lot of people are kind of going to do it a little bit wrong and still waste some money. But there you go, guys. There's the tips. So now from here, I'm going to talk about the next part. So I talked about that unidentified sextant, and I talked about how I've set these maps aside. So when I was vaulting these maps, before I vaulted them, I specifically did the monster pack size plus 3. And none of them have this right now. Or actually they might. There we go. So before they were vaulted, I did this, and I set these maps aside so that if they went unidentified, I would have a set of very high pack size, very high quantity maps that are unidentified for the unidentified sextant. And then I stacked that with monstrous treasure. So what monstrous treasure does is it takes all the monsters in your map and it puts them inside of strong boxes. So there's a strong box sextant that makes it so that monsters from strong boxes have 500% increased quantity dropped. This works with map drops, this works with item drops, everything. It is insane. So whenever I hit that strong box sextant and I hit the unidentified sextant, that's when I would grab my maps from down here and we would run those. The same goes for if I hit hunted traders and the unidentified sextant, because hunted traders spawns monsters that have increased item rarity and quantity. So when you can compound those big sextants with the prophecies or with the unidentified big maps, you get insane returns, and that's how you get clips like in my previous video. You can see there's one clip where in about a 30-second span we got 4 monstrous treasures, and 4 King's Hearts, and there's actually a 5th one that dropped a little bit before that. So you're investing a huge amount into these maps, but you'll get obscene amounts back sometimes. Like in that particular clip, that was about 300 chaos we made in 30 seconds. It's insane. So that's why mass investment into maps can be worth it. Now let's just talk about the other prophecies that can be really good. Bountiful traps. I would always use this prophecy if I noticed that the map had, we had the strongbox sextant, and then I would just seal it if it didn't proc. So I'll explain that in a second. But then Plague of Rats, whenever we had these, we'd just pop them in. They proc on indoor maps, and they just spawn some mobs that drop a little bit of extra stuff. They're pretty handy, it's worth using, and they're super cheap. Plague of Frogs, same story, except it works for outdoor maps. And then there's Tempests. So I'm going to show you guys what the Tempests do real quick. Just going to put these channels in. So what we can do is we can see it didn't proc. Now this is my method I was using. Obviously I would still run this map under normal circumstances, but what I just did was I re-rolled the maps that this has chosen to proc into. So every single time that you seal and unseal a prophecy, it re-rolls the maps that it can proc in. I'm gonna stop doing it with the Fire from the Sky because I don't know if this one's conditional. I never personally do the Tempest, but they add quantity to your map, so a lot of people do like running those. So anyways, so you know we're just gonna use Bountiful Traps and Plague of Rats, and they're just not gonna proc. Oh, I chose the wrong one. I should have chosen frogs. Let's put in a maze map, see if either of them are set to here. You know, you get the gist of it. But so see, there we go. Plague of Rats proc. If it didn't proc, I could seal it and put another Plague of Rats in. But this is important for the monstrous treasures in particular, because often you're going to forget by the time you get out of your map to seal this monstrous treasure. You should always try and do this after you put the map in, when the portal's open, before you put in your next map, or before you actually run the map. And I'd also recommend doing this, since my Bountiful Traps didn't proc, seal it, because, you know, what if I stop this section for whatever reason and I go run a random beach map on an alt, or sorry, on this character for who knows what reason. It might proc in there, and then you waste your good prophecy. And if you're doing monster treasures, you're out a lot of money when you do that, because monster treasures they cost a lot. So anyways, that kind of sums up the map rolling stuff for you guys. I hope it helped. I personally think that every single method of rolling maps is viable and worth it. That includes just the out and go method, the couple chisels and go, the full chisel and go, couple of chisels and sextants, full chisels and sextants. I don't really like running maps without chiseling if I'm going to sextant them. But you can do that if you want to. You know, you can figure out what style of map rolling works best for you. I don't think there is any best method other than maybe the full investment. If you're doing like high tier maps, or if you're doing like volcanoes or something that has a very high odds of good returns, the more you invest, you're obviously almost always going to make that money back. So, you know, the higher tier you're doing, maybe be willing to put a bit more in, go for the monster treasures on your sextants, things like that. But in general, just feel free to use any method of rolling. You know, here's my statement on it. A lot of people ask what I think is best for mapping, and I really think that it's good to mix it up. Do whatever you find the best. Like a lot of days I'll just want to blast through some maps really quick, so I just out and go, out and go, out and go, out and go. Or other days I just want to chisel and go because I don't really feel like sextanting. And then sometimes I want to sextant and chisel and go. And other times I want to sextant chisel beyond. Oh, shit. I should have talked about this earlier. But Zana mods. If you vol maps, Zana is going to charge you 4 extra vol orbs corresponding to the amount of currency it costs. So if we put this map in here, you can see every modifier now has vol orbs added. I don't think this is worth doing unless you're doing really high investment maps. Like if you're doing a monstrous treasure, fully sextanted, you know, feel free to throw beyond on that, even though it's vol, because, you know, it's probably worth it. Most likely that beyond is going to make you that amount of money back. However, I don't think that it is normally worth it. And as far as Zana mods, I don't think they're normally worth it unless you're doing high tier maps. Some people will disagree with me, but that's my personal opinion on it. Abyss, I think, is one of the most valuable ones right now. It's really good for map returns. And in future leagues, if you guys are watching this video, the modifiers here are going to change. So I'm not going to talk too in depth about each individual one. But personally, I would recommend against putting Zana mods on when you have a low amount of currency. Most of them will make you money back in extremely long term. We're talking potentially 1,000 maps before you make money back if you're on a bad luck streak. It does happen. Some people go broke off of it. But eventually you'll almost always make your money back because they add quantity. You can see Invasion adds 20 quantity on an Invasion boss. So between the extra pack and the quantity, you know, you're usually going to make 2C back eventually. So just think about that. And also think about that when you're chiseling. I don't know what the prices are on softcore right now, but if 4 chisels cost 2 or like 3C or something, because the ratios are really crazy, sometimes they get like that, the extra 12% quantity that you get from the Invasion might be better value than the chisels. Now, the reason it's 12% is because if you just put a map in blank with this mod up here, I'm doing 8%. This is 20. and you don't get that 8%. So you're adding 12% more than normal, or 13% if you don't have Zona 8, 14, 15, et cetera, based on your Zona level. Anyways, guys, this video is super long. I'm sorry for the length, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to rolling maps, and I wanted to make sure I was in depth and that you guys could get some real knowledge out of this video. I hope you all have a great night, and thank you all so much for supporting my stream and my YouTube. Like the video if you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video or my next stream. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.